is one of 50 accelerator programs throughout the world. Ours is focused on space and space adjacent technologies in partnership with all of the partners that you heard listed earlier, everyone from NASA, JPL to Lockheed Martin to Israel Aerospace Industries North America. And it's the opportunities that we help facilitate through our program span military, civil, and commercial opportunities. So our program is unique in that it spans those three types of opportunities. We are in our second year. We just actually wrapped our second year of program. So we have the 2019 cohort that was mostly focused on hardware, which included technologies such as electric satellite propulsion and gas station depots in space and generative design manufacturing tools. And then for the 2020 cohort, which we just wrapped up, it was mostly software focused. So, which isn't a surprise, and I can go into that later. But basically there were lots of API applications, synthetic data, pattern-based machine learning. So lots of different companies across the spectrum of technologies. And our program runs every summer. The next program will be starting next June, and applications will open in December. And I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the Accelerator experience and anything that has to do with our 2019 and 2020 cohorts. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bonnie. And one thing to note here is we do have a Q&A button for this session. So please remember to ask your questions, and actually you can then poll each other to see which questions are the most important given the time frame that we have. So thank you again, Bonnie. Janice, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and Bryce, please?
Hi, everyone. So I am the Vice President of Commercial Space at Bryce Space and Technology. So Bryce is a analytics and engineering firm. We work with commercial and government clients to solve long-term and complex problems using data and market analytics. We get to work with a very wide range of companies, both big and small, and government and private. And a very wide range of topics, which makes it an incredibly fun place to work. And it also makes it a great starting point for a career in space, because you get to learn about all different aspects. So just saying, please check our job boards. We're actually a startup 2 times over, because the company's original founding was back in 2001 as part of the Tory Group. So it started back almost 20 years ago now and grew into a very sizable company. And in 2017, the Bryce piece, which was the space and technology piece, was spun off separately and became a startup all over again. So there's a lot of experience that we have as a startup, but also we tend to work with startups quite a bit and support them and as they grow their businesses. So we help with their market forecasting and strategy. We do a lot of due diligence for investments. And we also do publish a lot of statistics on this. So every year we come out with a startup space report that looks at the investment in the space arena for startup companies. And we publish this as a way to show a baseline of data for knowledge across the industry, and also as a sample of the kind of information that we collect as a basis for our analytics. So I'm happy to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Janice. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about Planet, please?
Of course, yes. My name is Jeff Guido. Happy to be here. Thanks for the intro as well. I'm excited to talk to this group today because we as a new space community always need to be nurturing new leaders and new opportunities for the next generation. Just a little aside before I get into it, it's a very, being Saturday morning in my house, you may hear some background noise, so I apologize beforehand. But about Planet, founded in 2010 by a group of NASA scientists in a garage in Silicon Valley. Standard startup story, I believe. Planet has grown in its 10-year history to design, build, and operate the largest Earth observation fleet of satellites in history. Our vision is to image the entire Earth every day and to make global change visible, accessible, and actionable. And in this short history now, from the perspective of aerospace timelines, we've successfully deployed about 400 satellites. In our time, we've also tripled our constellation's imaging capacity. We've developed a vertically integrated and cloud-based imaging platform where we're trying to deliver imagery and insights to our users seamlessly every day and almost instantly. We have two complementary mission lines, I guess you can look at it. We have our medium resolution, which are commonly referred to as our doves, and our high resolution, which is commonly referred to as our SkySats. Those two mission lines, plus our recently retired rapid eye fleet, provides us a really deep data set that dates back to even before our founding, way back to 2009 and possibly even before. I'll have to look into that. But basically, it's a data stack that's making insights and change accessible for a very long period of time, which is quite an exciting tool for a lot of people around the world. In November 2017, we reached a major milestone as a company, and by launching and fully commissioning our full fleet of Dove satellites, about 88 satellites that allowed us to image the entire landmass of the Earth every day. And so when you start to have that type of temporal resolution, it starts to change the way that you look at the world. And so with this unique data set, we've been revolutionizing the way that our users process, analyze, and access the data. We make our data accessible via web-based APIs and online catalog. And then, because we're able to deliver terabytes of fresh data every day, we have found that adding machine learning analytics on top of that is making the speed to insights and the speed to decisions even faster for decision makers in organizations all around the world. Regarding types of customers that we have, we serve agriculture, energy, we serve domestic and international governments, mapping companies, finance, and business intelligence markets. And so and I think it's also worth mentioning that with the power of this data, it also has a large impact for climate, impact for human rights. And so we work with various NGOs on specific humanitarian projects all over the world to provide open data and support disaster relief efforts. So again, happy to be here and happy to answer questions and excited for the panel. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Next, we have Kyle Chernow. Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and iSpace, please?
Sure, Stefan. Well, thank you, everybody at the SGAC, and especially the organizers for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to get back in touch with my close friends. And unfortunately, we can't do this in person, but I'm glad to see that there's so many people from Colorado. I'm a recent mover to the state, and I look forward to catching up with my local friends very soon. So my name is Kyle Chernow. Been working for iSpace for about 5 years. And for those of you that don't know iSpace, we originally started as a Google Lunar X Prize team. So we were competing to be one of the first private companies to travel to the moon. And the winner of that prize would get $30 million. So originally when the company started, we were just building a rover. And that rover was built in collaboration with Tohoku University. But as time went on, we decided that if we wanted to get to the lunar surface and we wanted to make it a regular occurrence, we should build our own lunar lander. So in 2017, we raised $95 million US to build our own lunar lander that would deliver payloads to the moon. Since that time, we've raised another approximately 30 million. So we're about $125 million right now. We've made numerous partnerships and collaborations. We're a part of NASA CLPS. This is the Commercial Lunar Provider Service, which is a $2.6 billion procurement to deliver NASA payloads to the moon. In addition, we have our office in Luxembourg, which is working really closely with the Luxembourg Space Agency and the spaceresources.lu, which is an initiative started by the Luxembourg government to really jumpstart space resource utilization on the moon and on asteroids. We have our main office in Tokyo, where we have over 125 people right now that are working very hard on our first mission, which is scheduled for Q2 of 2022. So well, we're in really good shape. We're growing extremely fast. We have a new office in the United States. And I'm just really excited to be a part of this panel and look forward to talking to you more later. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kyle. Vanessa, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Atomos.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. So Atomos is very much a startup. We are probably the smallest company on this panel. So we were founded 3 years ago with the mission to allow access to higher orbits. So when I talk about our mission as a company, I like to talk about our founding story a little bit. So one of my previous roles in a larger organization, working in research, I was asked to reduce the cost of access to space, which is a big problem. Obviously, cost to get mass to orbits and satellites to where they need to be is a big barrier to entry for commercial and government satellite operators. And so looking at it from a physics and logistics perspective and taking lessons from other industries, it really makes sense to break rocket launch into 2 steps. Rockets should get payloads to low orbits. You can ride share, it can be more affordable. From a physics perspective, it's a lot better for the rockets with low fuel efficiency, low specific impulse. They're really suited to just get to low orbits rather than high orbits. Once the payloads or satellites are there, we should really be using a different method to get satellites to their final destinations. So this could be our onboard propulsion system, or the solution that we are offering clients is an orbital transfer vehicle. So this is a space tug that resides on orbit, rendezvous with payloads and satellites in these low, affordable to reach orbits and takes them to their final destination. So this entire system reduces the cost of access to space using current rockets, and looking at the market today, it can be cost savings of 20 to 40%. And so these are the clients we're looking to serve. When I presented this report to my old manager, this is about 5 or 6 years ago, it was shelved, and I was asked to design a different variant of a chemical rocket engine that had a little bit better performance. And so that was one thing that really inspired me to found Atomos, because we really need to look at new ways of operating, new technologies, new systems, completely different network and infrastructure to really see the growth in the space industry that we want to see. And so Atomos is a Colorado-based company. From our founding in late 2017, we've grown. We now have 11 people. We have revenue coming in from the US government, but we're still growing. Our first mission is also going up around 2022, around the same time as Kyle's. And this first mission will be a commercial mission of an orbital transfer vehicle where we will be doing some of the key steps to realize this technology. So rendezvous and docking with a client satellite and refueling. Now, where we want to go as a company is providing all logistics services beyond low Earth orbit. And the best technologies to do this are electric propulsion, because it's very fuel efficient for in space, but to speed it up and allow our clients to reach destinations faster, we also want these systems to be very high power. Increasing the power levels increases the thrust. And so technologies that we're also developing right now are related to next generation power systems for in-space use. And so we've been working a lot with the United States government on things like policy reform to allow space nuclear systems to be realized for applications such as ours. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Stefan.
Thanks, Vanessa. And before we go into the Q&A session, just wanted to tell you a little bit about GenSpace and why GenSpace exists. GenSpace is ultimately a platform to connect up ecosystems around the world and ideally, eventually around the universe that are focused on space entrepreneurship. I started GenSpace 3 years ago with the premise of figuring out why is there no universal platform for folks that want to do business in space, a go-to place that founders can go to freely and safely and securely, and discuss the basic principles of business entrepreneurship without worrying about ITAR. Now, I know that there's ITAR restrictions about technology and sharing that across borders, but I really feel that there is a need to pull in all the different accelerators, groups like Techstars and all different entities, people like Bryce that are pulling in reports, and mostly educating the world and inspiring, hopefully inspiring the next generation workforce to look at space as an opportunity, whether to migrate to, do business in, or just to learn about the different aspects of space and how that can improve people's lives on Earth. I mean, this panel is amazing because we have folks that are doing Earth observation, Earth data, reports, access to space. So I'm pretty excited to motivate people to look at space as a career or to share their passions about space. So let me just jump into the questions and answers, and hopefully, we're going to try to inspire more questions. So I see that there's a QA button that people haven't used yet, but the good news is we have some pre-thought of questions that people have submitted through Google Forms. So to jump in, the first one, I think this is a fun one from Jeffrey Stewart at NASA JPL. What's one childhood lesson that has served you well in your entrepreneurial endeavors or pursuits? I don't know how you guys want to go about answering this. Maybe we'll go in reverse order. Vanessa, what's one childhood lesson that served you well in being successful as an entrepreneur?
You know, I was thinking about this question, and I think one of the strongest lessons was actually from my time in college. So I had a very unusual path. I trained as a physicist and wanted to be an engineer, and realized that this is now 12, 13 years ago, there were no careers in space in Australia. So I was looking for a way to have an exchange semester or work internationally during my degree. And I was told, this is against university rules, you can't do it. And, you know, I was kind of shocked by that, but then I didn't take no for an answer and ended up finding a very strange path to get to Germany. So I ended up suspending my studies, enrolling as a guest student at a foreign university, and then getting a job at back then what was called Astrium, but is now Airbus Defence and Space. And when I went back to Australia with these credentials, they're like, oh, we guess we have to give you your degree. So that was a very interesting lesson in that don't always take no for an answer. Be very, very smart in breaking the rules or bending the rules to get to the end that you seek.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. Kyle, what about you? What's one fun childhood lesson that served you well to be successful?
I would just say tenacity is something that I learned as a kid by trying to do many things. So I wasn't one of these people who always loved space and was into space since a kid. It was something that came a little bit later in my life. However, even in previous pursuits, and just building upon what Vanessa just said, there's been a lot of times where people have said, you're not going to be able to do that, or that's crazy. And I think most of us who work in the space industry have heard that before. So being tenacious, keeping your eye on the goal, that's something that as a kid I've just continued to do, and it's continued to serve me well.
Thanks, Kyle. Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, thanks. So I think, you know, space is a team sport. It's one of those things where you can get a lot of people together that are passionate and want to do great things for humanity or just for ego or whatever it is. But it's a team sport. And so even though it's very possible to go out and seek the talent that you need in individuals, the ability to get a group of people to work well together is something that is critical to success of any venture. And I think we've all heard the term space is hard. I would say that, you know, an extension on that is that getting all those space people to work together is even harder sometimes. And so I think even though I don't have a specific example, I think I can go back to the numerous times where watching, you know, icons in sports or something like that, great sports teams that we all thought, hey, if we get the right group of people together, they're going to crush everyone. Hasn't played out true because they weren't able to work together. And I think even though we are not necessarily, you know, celebrities or icons as like a sports athlete would, it's the same challenge. You get a lot of people together that are very talented, and if you can't get them to work well, then you're not going to get off the ground. So I think that that's something that is critical to take in every aspect of this type of question, being like, what is the most important entrepreneurial lesson, or what is a good lesson from childhood? I think this starts to poke at that. Yeah, I'd love to hear other thoughts if that resonates with folks or whatever. But I think that that's my main thing, and that's my main theme that I bring to work on a daily basis.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for sharing. Janice, how about you?
All great answers that I fully believe in. And one thing I would add to it is the confidence to be yourself. I think in being a startup and following this path means you need to really believe in what you're doing to have the confidence and tenacity to push it forward. And being able to step back and look at, most of the startups are looking at, this is the way everyone else is doing it. Maybe that's not the best way. Maybe my idea is better, right? And having the confidence to believe in your own thoughts is probably one of the best.
Awesome. Thanks, Janice. And Bonnie, what do you think?
Yeah, so 100% on board with what everybody else said. I think that there's a lot of wisdom in what happened to us as children and how we have all gotten to where we are today. I think that me, it's always been super important to not succumb to feeling like you have to stop if you're not the most knowledgeable person on a particular topic in the room. So that childhood curiosity, like if you don't know something, like go be excited about it, go read up on it, be interested in the world around you, and don't think that it's not accessible to you because that's not what you're strong at yet. You heard from some of the panelists that they entered space a little bit later in their careers, and it's certainly open to everyone who's listening. So I would just encourage that curiosity.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. One of my favorite books is 30 Lessons for Living, and if no one's read it, it's pretty cool. It's lessons from the elderly on advice that they give back to the world. I just want to, it's tough, and I was trying to think of which one can I add. So I remember getting pulled my ears pulled by my mom when I lied, and I learned very early on that lying might work, but it's hard to remember your lies. So why not be truthful? So I think an important lesson that I learned, a childhood lesson that I applied, but first of all, not just the entrepreneurial life, but my day-to-day life, is truthfulness. So this is great. I think we can all write a book pretty much on entrepreneurship lessons learned from childhood. So the exciting thing is we actually have had a bunch of questions come in from the audience, and I'm going to try to pull up one here. And I guess this is along the same lines. I know that we're going back on our childhood lessons, but the question from an anonymous question came in: if you have one piece of advice to give someone aspiring to start a company, what would it be? And it'd probably be a combination of what we spoke about, but let's just go round table again. Bonnie, one piece of advice to someone aspiring to start a company, what would that be?
Just get started. Get started right away. Like don't sit on that. Oh, I think maybe I'll do that, or maybe just if you have an idea, if you're excited about what it is, dive headfirst into learning everything you can about that particular technology, the market. Like ask lots of questions, connect with people in the industry, and just get going.
Great, Janice.
I'd say also there's a lot of truth behind the "it takes a village" sentiment, where be aware of who's around you to support you, and if it's family, if it's friends, if it's others in the industry, they want to help too. So it's being open to those lines of assistance.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, those comments resonate real well. I think I like the don't waiting, and I would extend that to say, get your idea out, with either it's to a mentor or to a group of people that can give you feedback. I think, at least personally, I'm speaking personally here, like I will think something's a great idea, but I'm afraid to verbalize it and bring it to existence because someone might say, "Oh, that's stupid," or things like that. And that's not the right way to do it. You want to test your idea in an open space frequently and early, so that you can iterate. You'll come up with a better concept quicker that way, versus just holding on to it. So and getting over that and being able to tell your story in a great way is something that is critical, and is a skill or a muscle that needs to be developed. I think, Vanessa, I love how you started talking about the founding story of your company, and and how that works. And I think that you're obviously someone that has done that quite a bit. And I think you've demonstrated your willingness to overcome that hump. And I think that's fantastic. And that's what new entrepreneurs need to do as well. So that's my input.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks. Kyle.
Yeah, I would just, of course, agree with what everyone said, and maybe add something a little bit different. I think it's, it's pretty obvious, but space is a bit of an expensive place to play. And if you're going to start a company, I'd recommend having a bit of money prepared, whether it be your own money, whether it be some investments, or whether it's a grant. The biggest thing that I've seen over the past couple of years, even though they're great ideas, even though they're a great team, if you don't have the capital to survive and pay people, ultimately you're going to fail. And we've seen that unfortunately happen a few too many times, in specifically in our sector, in lunar exploration. But you see it a lot. So make sure you got a good chunk of cash saved before you dive into something too ambitious. Otherwise, be very, very lean. That's what's going to help you to get past those really difficult milestones. And I think everyone here has seen that. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Kyle. And Vanessa, please.
So, oh gosh, 3 years in, I have so many pieces of advice, things that we did wrong that we don't want other people to do wrong. And so I guess my main piece of advice is centered around go talk to the people who have done what you want to do successfully or done something similar. Talk to someone like Stefan, who created and exited a very successful company. You need help setting up your cap table so it's correct, setting up your vesting so it's correct, presenting your deal to investors so that you can fundraise, presenting yourself so that you're competitive for government grants or contracts, making sure you're working with the right people and not lying to yourselves about your own abilities or your teammates' abilities. There are so many things. And I think that in the beginning, for us as a company, we spoke to people who aspired to be entrepreneurs or aspired to be investors and weren't actually those things. And they, in some cases, sent us down the wrong path. So find people who you aspire to be or created companies that you aspire to create and talk to them and get their advice. There's an interesting statistic. So with entrepreneurs who have created a company and failed and start a second company, the success of that second company is as likely as a fresh new entrepreneur. So you need to talk to people who did things successfully, because people who did things and failed, they didn't learn anything. Maybe they learned the wrong thing to do, but they didn't learn the right thing to do. So you need to find people who were successful in what you want to do and bring them on as mentors or take them out to coffee.
This is amazing pieces of advice. Hopefully everyone on the call is capturing all this. If I can just add one thing, the question was giving one piece of advice to someone aspiring to start a company. Just remember, when you start a company, it should be a business. And I think one of the aspects of when someone mentioned, make sure you're funded. So it's not just that you need an idea, you need a business around it. So to make a business successful, you need to figure out, first of all, who are your co-founders, how's your team going to work together, and ultimately, how are you going to make money? And if you need to raise money, how are you going to return some type of a positive return to your investors? So make sure that you're not just following an idea as a passion, but making it a business. We have a bunch more questions. This is pretty exciting now. So Brian Kester asks, what is the most important government policy change that could be made to improve entrepreneurial activities in space? He's saying in another way, if we are involved in government, how would we support innovation in space? Maybe if I can jump out of order here. So Janice, what do you think of answering? How would you answer that question?
So I don't know that a policy change is necessarily what you're looking for. It's taking advantage of the opportunities that most people don't know about. So there's a lot of support within government now for startups and for different technology developments and SBIRs and all sorts of different funding lines. But it is actually already policy for NASA and AFWorks and DIU to support commercial industry and support growth and development with the industry. So it's figuring out how to tap into those areas, which is not obvious and not intuitive necessarily, that is the best path, rather than seeking a policy change that might not happen.
Okay, great. And Bonnie, what are your thoughts being part of Techstars?
Yeah, I agree completely, Janice. I don't know that there is that a policy change is necessary. There are lots of current vehicles in government funding that support entrepreneurs today. I think educating yourself on what those are, even reading, papers on policy on how different agencies are thinking about space and technology and innovation generally is really helpful. And there's a lot of policy papers from the Aerospace Corp that I find actually very informative about how they are guiding different agencies on what different technologies should look like in different iterations of where they are today and what the future looks like as well. So educating yourself.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. Jeff, what do you think? If you're involved in government, how could government support innovation in space, whether better or?
It's the way that this is going. I'm kind of cautiously optimistic with some of the changes that the U.S. government has made in the space, in the way that they want to, specifically the DoD wants to invest in the commercial space ecosystem. Janice, you mentioned AFWorks, which I think is a great idea and a great way of something that's probably I hope is going to yield some good results for smaller companies to nurture those and make it so that they can grow up more quickly. Anything that can be done to reduce the barriers, I think, to access. So there are a number of different facets of that. I think from a regulatory perspective, there are some regulatory rules that are a little bit, they were created or conceived in the Cold War. And so I think that there's probably some changes that could happen there that could open up and reduce the barriers to entry for some 21st century ways of thinking around space and the infrastructure that is developing in low Earth orbit, as well as the infrastructure that some of the people on this call wants to develop between the Earth and the Moon. So there's probably some forward thinking that can be applied. But yeah, I'm optimistic about what AFWorks can bring, and I think that it's starting to show that our representatives and government servants in the government are starting to think of how to shift the incentives of the ecosystem so that we can get into it more easily.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Kyle, with your international exposure. Oh, sorry.
Can I just comment on that for 1 second? So it's funny that you talk about barriers to entry and barriers to the market. And we're actually currently working on 3 separate projects for different arms of the government on looking at what the barriers to development are and how the government can mitigate those barriers in a successful way to promote commercial industry. These are projects that are ongoing, already exist. They are looking for these answers. So coming up with those answers and all sorts of different contract mechanisms like the next steps and all of that are asking these questions. So if you have solutions for them, bring them forward.
Yeah, if I can also just jump in really quickly. I realize that the person who wrote that question is in government already, and what I would just say to anyone who is working in government today is to not be passive about what are startups doing in space technology today. There are one of our partners is the U.S. Air Force. They are very active in the startup space. Look at the partnerships and the accelerators that they are currently involved in, and why those technologies were super interesting to them that they made it into those accelerator programs and are sponsored by the U.S. Air Force or Aerospace Corp or other agencies. I think there is a lot. There's a lot of activity happening right now, and the more that you can involve yourself and get excited about those companies companies and the technologies that exist, the more that they're going to be promoted forward. The most important thing that I've seen as a game changer for any of the startups is having an advocate within government to help shepherd along sometimes these very long cycles of applying for government funding and figuring out what the next step is.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. And Kyle, you've had exposure and experience in multi countries here for iSpace. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'll just specifically speak about lunar exploration because that's my game. But what I can tell you is recently there's been a huge shift in companies' abilities to get to the moon, specifically because of two programs. Both are North American. So this is more advice to any attendees that are outside of North America. But the CLIPS program, the Commercial Lunar Provider Service Program, is America's program to get payloads to the lunar surface and pay for the transportation service. So government's paying for a service, I think, has been a fantastic idea. And then also providing the capital through the various programs which were discussed already, so that people can build the research and the development and then send the payload to the moon. Canada has a similar program. It's called the Lunar Exploration Accelerator program. And it's really helping Canadian companies to develop technology, and then they're paying for the launch, which is absolutely key. So this is more some advice, I think, to our European colleagues, Australian, even in Japan. I think this is something that's going to come very soon. But I think the government really does still have a key role here in helping companies to just get past that really large barrier of entry into space, literally. So if governments can do that, I think you're going to see an explosion of entrepreneurial activities on the lunar surface.
Hey, thanks, Kyle. And I personally had experience 9 months working for CASIS, now known the ISS National Lab, and one of the big pushes was to get more technology and innovation into space and fund it as best as possible, make it as easy to put the project up to space, and then figure out what's the investment requirements. So Vanessa, what are your thoughts?
So I know that we have an international audience, so I'm going to, I guess, provide some lessons from working with the US government. So if you look at the Department of Defense and NASA and their programs that support small companies and how they differ. The Department of Defense's new program, AvWorks, which few people have mentioned already, is significantly different and actually helps companies a lot more. The Air Force essentially has said, come bring us your solution that addresses a need that we may have, and we'll decide if we want to fund it. NASA is saying, hey, we want someone to design this thermal management system that we put on a mission to Europa one day. And so the difference in asking the question between tell us what you can do and what problems you can solve, and hey, fix this very specific technology problem, has created two different types of ecosystems. On the DoD side, it's companies that are very business focused. On the NASA side, it's companies that are very technology and R&D focused. And on the NASA side, these companies aren't really growing. They're just becoming research shops for the government. My recommendation is that if you're in government looking at a procurement program for any industry vertical, be it space or aerospace or cybersecurity, look at what AvWorks is doing, because it's really helping. We were able to go to the Air Force and say, this is where we want to go. These are our near-term capabilities. Here are our long-term capabilities. This is how we want to work with you. And they were like, oh, this sounds great. We'll fund you. Like, it's such a different approach that really changed our probability of success as a company.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. Pulling up some more questions here. Let's see, there's a question from Ishani Das on YouTube. Is it always imperative to have a unique idea to initiate a startup? Is there a scope for flourishing a pre-existing idea in a region or country where it's not much prevalent or accessible? Bonnie, what are your thoughts?
I think the most important thing is to have an idea that addresses a current or very near future problem. In terms of the uniqueness of that idea, the market for every idea is going to be different. So you would want to do some market analysis of what that idea looks like. But I don't think being the only one in the space. You're likely not gonna be the only one that has your idea. The most important thing is, can you execute on that idea, and can you execute it to the tune of what is needed by your customers. So the more you can understand that, the more you can address those needs of who the buyers are, the more opportunity you have to succeed.
Great. Janice, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Bonnie. I think, that for startups, it's not necessarily a new idea, but it is a new solution or a new market or a new, there has to be some sort of differentiator to make your chance of success higher than it would be if you're just going after the same things that others are going after.
Jeff?
Yeah, Janice said the key word that I was going to say, a differentiator. I think to take it further, just to pull the thread a little bit more, the making sure that you are not easily replicated or repeated, I think is also going to be just a key aspect of your value proposition. Because if someone else can do what you're doing easily, then it's you're going to spend more time just trying to stay ahead versus providing a better service and experience for your customers. There's just one way in which you can be undermined. So I think that's yeah, pretty sufficient for that. Yeah, it's mostly a differentiation and making sure you can't be easily copied.
Kyle, it's getting tougher because they're bringing up really good points. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say it. We've seen it happen numerous times, even in lunar exploration, where similar companies were founded in different countries, but because of a lack of political support or financial means or team or numerous other examples or reasons, they weren't able to get it together. So if you are able to create a company and you're sure that you can get that support that you need, if you can do something cheaper than anyone else and you can keep that company together longer, I think you should do it, because even though there are competitors that may exist in other countries, you never know how long those companies are going to be around. So, look for those opportunities and stick with it. Be tenacious, like I said before.
Awesome. And Vanessa?
Yeah, so I agree with what everyone said. One of our investors gave us some great advice, saying that you're not competing against your competitors. We do have competitors. You're competing against the clock. You're seeing if you can get these spacecraft operating on orbit in time before you run out of money. You're competing to see if you can get the best engineers on board. So it's having other players in the field often isn't a detractor. Actually, for us, we have a very more prominent competitor and we use some of their market sizing figures and use their valuation, saying, hey, look, we could be worth this much. We're just a year behind. Like, it's good to have a competitor in a lot of cases as well, because they also are pathfinding and they're finding more resistance. So if you can catch their tailwinds, it's also a good thing.
Great. Thanks. Another question, I believe it's from Angola, from Marco Romero. What is your opinion about the possibility of migrating a startup from outside the Space Spectre into the space ecosystem, either from identifying an opportunity or from recognizing that the startup already has an unexplored space component? So what's the possibility of spin-ins into the space entrepreneurial ecosystem? Let's see. Janice, what are your thoughts?
So there's a lot of non-space in space, I'd say, now, and that's growing. And I think, Jeff can probably speak to it a little bit more, but we need more non-space technology brought into space to make it a little bit more accessible widely for different markets. So, the analytics piece of the remote sensing needs non-space players to make it broadly accessible and create the market that needs to be created for this to become the market it can become. So, right now we're seeing with just recently, AWS and Microsoft both coming in with cloud computing services directly to the space market. They can bring access to all sorts of non-space markets that we don't have easy access to. I think that's a great example of being able to expand what we can do with space technology.
Thanks, Janice. Bonnie, what are your thoughts, especially with what Techstars looks for?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I mentioned this in the intro that our 2019 companies were mostly hardware, very hyper focused on space. Our 2020 cohort really was a broad spectrum, and there were a lot of software applications that had both terrestrial and space applications. So I certainly think it's going to, you know, there's going to be a lot of overlap, especially when it comes to data. I think there's a lot of room for you know, dual use and Earth observation. So I think that it's absolutely possible and absolutely part of growing the space ecosystem overall.
Thanks, Bonnie. Jeff, what are your thoughts on maybe what Planet's doing with the impact in Earth observation?
Yeah, I could. Thanks. I could use the story of Planet a little bit to talk about this. I think and Janice, thanks for the tee up as well. I think that was a good, excellent way of putting it. The at Planet, when we started, we put a bunch of, you know, loaf of bread sized spacecraft into orbit. We got the data down, and while it was something that, you know, very few people, if any, had ever done before and achieved to get data like that out of a form factor that's small, we found out pretty quickly that if you're just meeting the needs of the people that are most adjacent or within the space community, you're not going to have a viable business for forever. You need to find a way to expand that beyond what just the space community needs to what users need. So the way that you can add value and add services to that and move downstream, for at least for a data company, then like us, then that's something that's going to make it easier and easier for us to reach our customers. What's interesting about the spin-in or the integrations or things like that is finding the interfaces with which these non-space companies can sort of bring their infrastructure up to the infrastructure of the space company, so that what flows across is adding value to just the normal everyday people that don't look at data like ours on a regular basis. You want to consistently make it easier and easier to access, bringing those insights more quickly to the forefront so that decisions can be made. I think it's a very interesting story that Bonnie is telling about how the Techstars classes were so dramatically different. The software as a company model, I think, at least with the whole tech industry, has shown that, like, if you have a software as a service model, there are generally higher margins. It's very easy to replicate that software and deploy it and distribute it, versus some of the more physical limitations about distributing hardware globally. And so that's what we are trying to achieve at Planet, is to try and make the image that we take once to be used by many, many people in many, many different ways. If we're taking one image and it's only used by one person, that has less of a sort of commercialization potential than an image that we take once and is used by hundreds. So that's a very, I think, very narrow view of like how it looks from Planet's view. And yeah, I don't have all the experience or background to be able to talk to like how the other members on this panel handle that, because they may have a little bit more hardware focus. So it'd be interesting to hear like how Kyle and Vanessa are handling these challenges to sort of bring together some of the non-space technology with their infrastructure.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Kyle, how are you guys? What are your thoughts on this, and how are you guys handling the spin-in aspect of it?
Well, I would say since we started, we spent more than 60% of our time working with people outside of the space industry. So when we did our first Google Lunar X Prize challenge, we were working with companies in the automotive sector like Suzuki, or telecommunications like KDDI, who originally hadn't thought about space, but through conversations, we showed them that in the near future, they're going to have opportunities to expand their business. So that was when we started more than about 10 years ago. Now we've raised over half of our money from investors that are outside of the space industry and have no relationship with space whatsoever. All of our corporate partners and even some of our payloads are from companies that have no experience in space. Some of these companies, they're all Japanese, by the way, but some of them are over 100 years old. So what's happening in Japan is really fascinating because these companies are thinking, how am I going to be in business 100 years from now? And they're seeing what's happening in space, and they're looking at that as a strategic opportunity to expand their business. Suzuki, I'll just talk about that again very briefly, because I think it's such an exciting company that really, their expertise is in off-road vehicles. And when we explained the challenge that we were having trying to navigate the lunar surface, they saw an opportunity there. They decided to get involved. A good portion of Suzuki was just purchased by Toyota recently. And for those of you who may have seen, Toyota is now building the Lunar Cruiser, which is a pressurized lunar vehicle on the moon. And Toyota is the 6th biggest company in the world. They are enormous. And when Toyota starts doing something, all of Japan starts doing something. So we see these vibrations that are spreading across the whole industry. If we're going to have any sort of cislunar ecosystem, it's going to be imperative that many companies who specialize in everything that we need to do here on Earth can then help us to develop a system on Earth, or pardon me, on the lunar surface. Just specifically, we started talking to like a concrete company, because honestly, we're building a lunar vehicle, but we don't know how to build a launch pad or a place that we can, drive things on the moon without spreading lunar regolith out of there everywhere. But concrete companies would be the best. And we're talking to them already and see if they want to expand their business into space. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunities. If you have an idea that you can spin something that's terrestrial into space, I think you're ultimately going to be really successful in building a new market.
Great, thanks, Kyle. And Vanessa, what are your thoughts on this?
So I'll try to be very short. So it's really every week where we're finding a component for one of our vehicles and we're like, oh gosh, this is so expensive. Oh, but it's 1/1,000,000th of the price if we buy something that wasn't designed for space but can do the same thing. Like, please bring your non-space hardware into space, because we're looking to do that and space qualify terrestrial hardware for our application. The second thing I want to say is that if you're exploring creating a space product or serving space industry customers, a good piece of advice is to shoot bullets, then cannonballs. So test the waters, create a mock data sheet for your product. Talk to satellite operators or potential customers about it, get their feedback, go talk to them about their problems, see if you could actually solve something for them before you invest a lot in creating a space product, because it is a difficult and expensive process at times.
Thanks, Vanessa. Bonnie, I have a quick question to you from Igor Sesarov. The question is, does Techstars support space startups created by non-US or non-EU founders?
Yes, that we absolutely do. We accept applications from all across the globe. This year, I had founders in both the EU and in Singapore. So yes, it is absolutely open to everyone. And there are certain ITAR restrictions that will make it more difficult for certain companies to do business with our government partners, and that we have to take into account. But the application process is open to all. And I encourage anyone who would be interested in potentially participating to at least apply and just see how that fares through the process.
And Bonnie, if there's a link, maybe you want to share it on the chat or for people to sign up. Great. And let's see, there's one specific question here, Vanessa, from Alexis Cabana L'Oreal. What was or is your process to ensure sufficient funding for your projects? How hard is it to swim with the big fish? And luckily, they didn't say how bad is it to deal with the sharks.
All right. So again, very quickly, because there are some great questions in the queue. I think there are 3 aspects to this. One is being very strategic. So for us, raising venture capital, we look at the capital that we want to bring in. So for example, our first raise was around $900,000. Like, okay, what do we want to accomplish with that capital? Could we justify a future valuation to raise more money? So at each step, when we bring in money, we have to make sure that we're building enough value to bring in more money. So for example, with this next fundraise, we're completing our first mission that's going to do a lot of technological firsts and is very valuable, and would justify an increase in our value as a company to go fundraise more. And these milestones have also been floated in front of investors who have gotten their feedback. And so planning out long-term financing of the company is something that we did as soon as we founded. It was very important to make sure that we could always do something valuable enough to get to the next stage to bring in more capital. The second thing I want to talk about is cost control. We are very economic. No dollar leaves the company without approval by myself and my co-founder. We've accomplished a lot, won government contracts, brought on a great team, and we've only spent around $1 million to date. And we're a team of 11. Like, it's kind of extraordinary how little cash we spent. The final thing is, in terms of funding, you have to be ahead of the curve if you're looking for government funding. So we have consultants who are essentially doing government business development for us, keeping us informed of upcoming opportunities, but also planting the seeds with government customers saying like, hey, this is a capability that Atomics is developing. When you create this program in 3, 4, 5 years, they'd be a great candidate to receive funding and execute that program for you. So being ahead of the curve for winning government contracts is something that we're also doing. So I'd say it's a combination of those 3 aspects.
Thank you. Thanks, Vanessa. Here's a question from Harry Laird. A couple of space companies have tapped into conventional equity sources recently by going public using SPACs. And for those of you who don't know, it's basically a special acquisition company. It's a public company that is raising money to buy a private firm. What do the panelists, are we seeing an increase in financing from conventional debt sources in the new space industry? Bonnie, what are your thoughts?
I'm so sorry. You cut out for a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the whole question, so probably best to go on to someone else because I didn't hear what you said.
Sure.
Sorry.
It's the question from Harry.
I'll look at it.
Sure. Janice, what are your thoughts on the question of are we seeing an increase in financing from conventional debt sources?
From debt, I'd say probably not. There's a lot of debt financing in more traditional space companies, and particularly in satellite companies. They have very easy access to debt in general. And there was an increase in the use of debt for newer space companies when we saw insurance through export control agencies, or export credit agencies, I'm sorry, for a while, and that sort of slowed down. But generally speaking, we refer to this as venture space companies rather than just startup or new space, because there is a different risk trade-off, and the risk appetite in most conventional debt is not there. So most of the other funding sources for these types of companies make more sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can I jump in, Stefan? So for us as an early stage startup, we are very high risk. And the best investor that matches our risk and funding needs is traditional venture capital or government funding. And that's not going to change until we are generating a lot of revenue and have more assets.
Good points. Anyone else want to jump in? Not to go in any particular order. Okay, well, hopefully we've given you a perspective on that. So a question from Anthony the Kiko. Hopefully I'm saying that right. For those of you that have not pursued private investment, how have you built credibility with government customers for the technology you're proposing? Is there a particular recommended way to build credibility with government customers? Kyle.
Our strategy has been to bring in the government early. We almost approached them the same way we approached investors, whereby we introduced our idea to them. We told them what we were going to do, and then when we did it, we showed them again. As our technology was evolving, we would bring them in to do reviews so that they could understand and also, provide advice. And I think that's actually been a really positive for us. We've now built a really strong relationship with most of the governments that we work with, and we hope that will continue as more and more new space agencies and new countries get involved in space exploration.
Anyone else want to take a
Yeah,
stab?
yeah, I have some things to add. So when we were started, just the co-founders, before we built out the technical team and had closed our private fundraise and won government contracts, it was very difficult to get traction with customers and government customers. It is tough. Like it's, we applied for awards, we had meetings. It was in some cases very difficult to be taken seriously. And so my advice is don't overpromise, and also build credibility by association. So we gained a lot of credibility by being a Techstars company. So we went through Techstars back in 2019, not Bonnie's program, but the original program here in Boulder, Colorado, which built a lot of credibility. And then once we won our first government contract, we could also use that for credibility and say, hello, other command in Space Force, we have a contract through the Air Force. And so by association with other government contracts, we could build credibility that way.
Great, thanks. And Badi, what kind of advice do you share with your cohorts, and how would you answer this question?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what Kyle and Vanessa said, and to Vanessa's point, part of what we provide as an accelerator is that credibility because of the 7 partners that we have in our program that are focused on space and space adjacent technologies. So we are pushing very hard to get 2 years of commercial traction within the 3 months of program. So it's a very full force effect to get some kinds of partnerships in place before the end of program to establish that credibility. Also just building relationship mentor network. Last year we had, I think, about 130 mentors who came into the program, and this year we had about 210, which was a benefit actually to the virtual format, having to switch over because more people were able to participate across time zones. But I think Kyle and Vanessa really covered it perfectly. That the more that you're able to say, like, we have something in the works with X partner who is already an established entity within the aerospace or within whatever specific vertical you're working in, it does actually make a huge difference.
Great, thanks. Anyone else want to take an answer to this? We have
I'll jump in too. The relationship building that's sort of key. I think the government is a great partner, a strategic partner. I think they need to be viewed as someone that is, or a entity that is one that needs to be nurtured and developed over time, because what we found is we mutually influence the other's requirements and outlook. And so Planet has at times looked at what can we do differently to meet government needs, and through just collaboration is something that we've done, and through that and being a good open and sincere about those collaboration opportunities, you naturally build up trust through that. I love the association discussion that's also happening here, and I think that's also very important. But where I've gotten the most value is through being able to build something together and show how there is mutual value in working together, and that's something that takes a lot of time. I think Vanessa, you said something earlier about how you kind of have to I don't quite remember how you said it, but you have to think long term, essentially, I think is what you were saying, with the government, and that has to do with all the budget processes and other cycles that the government goes through that are longer than what a startup's budget cycle or decision process even may be. So keeping all that in mind has been very helpful to set our expectations as a company as far as like what we can expect to achieve with the government.
Great, thanks. We have a little bit under 15 minutes left, so please either suggest some more questions, please share your questions with us, or poll on the questions. I have a quick question here that I can probably target Kyle, one about Artemis. So with 8 signatories for the Artemis Accords announced at IAC, what government policies are you anticipating most? What's your quick view and outlook for non-US signatories in light of this?
Well, I saw that event like many people did, and honestly, I mean, I've been watching a lot of stuff online, but for me, that was one of the most exciting and I don't know, I was just really inspired, that all those countries could come together and sign these accords. And NASA has and the American government has done tremendous work in leading this charge. I think what we will see very quickly is that other nations are going to sign up to this. I'm really hoping that some Latin American countries are going to sign up to this next. And what will come along with this are every nation's participation. So they signed the accords, but now what are they going to do to be a part of that? What is their contribution going to be? And that's what's, I think, going to be really exciting, because you're going to see a lot more countries finding ways to do things on the moon. And they're going to be innovative. They're probably going to go through the CLIPS program, which means that that program is going to grow quite a bit. Not every country has this capability of developing lunar landers. So that's really going to, again, siphon money towards the US companies that are doing this. And ultimately, it's going to be a good platform for companies who've never had, or countries that have never had a chance to get to the moon, to finally be there, be a part of this new global community, and ideally showcase their technology. So Artemis Accords are just fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to how they start to incorporate, especially space resources development, into the equation. Space resources is getting a lot of discussion these days, whether it's legal or illegal, whether you can have property ownership, how you can sell those resources. So I think this is just the beginning of a really exciting decade of lunar exploration.
Pretty cool times. Thanks, Kyle. Anyone else want to share a perspective on Artemis? Next, I'd like to address maybe morph two questions into one here. Both a question from an anonymous attendee and also from Zachariah Lem. So from college and onward, there are some challenges. What challenges did you run into getting into the space industry and related work? And to tie in this other question, can you actually start in the space industry without having a tech background? And Bonnie, I know you have amazing answers for this. Please go ahead.
So starting with the college and forward, I think that you've heard a little bit of a common thread that there's going to be a need for collaboration between space-focused technologies and those that are very terrestrial focused and will have a space application. So just to echo the advice that I think that we've all kind of given is, you can start in space, you don't have to. And when you say a space background, I'm guessing you're meaning a very scientific background. I think that it's certainly helpful, especially if you're going after a hardware piece of the technology puzzle. But barring that, there's a lot of technology that you can certainly start to figure out without having that particular type of background. So again, educate yourself. Don't feel like you have to have any kind of specific background. That's part of what being an entrepreneur is. I will say that when we are looking at teams, when we're evaluating, whether a team it's the right move to invest in them, we will look to see that there is some technical expertise, but you personally, it doesn't mean that each person has to be that technical expertise. As long as there is someone who is able to drive that part of the ship and make sure that there is, real knowledge that goes along with, doing something on the moon is very different than doing it here where there is gravity and there are other laws of physics that are at play. So you do want that technical expertise on your team, but you don't have to be it. So start planning, start building, and build out your team in a way that's really thoughtful.
Great, thanks. Janice? Or actually, Vanessa, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so there were two questions here. So the first one was about challenges post-college getting into the industry. So I obviously forced my way to Germany to try to get into the space industry. After completing my contract at Ariane Group, I ended up doing an unpaid internship for 12 months. And so during that, I was promoted to a research assistant, and I was paid 600 euros a month. And it was during that entire time I was looking for a full-time job. I did know the exact number. It was about 76 job applications out while I was doing that unpaid position, targeting everywhere in Europe, anywhere that I could get a visa to work as an Australian engineer. And I ended up getting a job offer that was yanked away at the last minute because of a hiring freeze at the company. Like, it was painful, but I stuck through it for 12 months with very little money, learning the language, becoming more competent working in German, and eventually got a fully German speaking position through a contact. So it wasn't an online application, it was through meeting and knowing people, and people knowing how I had come learning the German language and how I had been grinding through for 12 months with really little money. So post-college challenges, like even successful people have them. Yeah, I definitely recommend looking at options to work in other countries if your country doesn't have a space industry, because there are countries like Germany that has a very good program for people of technical backgrounds able to get visas and work there in the space industry. And just keep going. It sucks, but if you're persistent, you'll find something. Now, the second part of the question, wanting to create a space company with a non-space background. My co-founder is from the finance industry. He was a space advocate, really into space. It was his hobby before this. What he brings from the finance industry is stuff that I never would have known and no one else on my team knows. And it's really valuable. So definitely don't see it as a barrier to creating a space startup, but find people who complement you and complement your lack of knowledge in space, and make sure that you bring something unique to the table as well.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. Does anyone else want to address the question?
Just want to add one thing that Vanessa touched on, and it's networking. And this industry in particular is one where the world is fairly small, even though it's global, and we're chock full of people who are really passionate about what they do, which is phenomenal and not seen everywhere. But having organizations like this, where you have the opportunity to get to know people in different companies and different industries, it not only helps you with your career path, but it helps you be better at your job and helps you be able to understand what's happening in other places to make what's happening in your own company better. So I would say this industry, more than many, has more emphasis on relationships and networking.
And if I can just add to that, I mentioned that our program benefited actually from from having to switch over to virtual. And I would say that the industry overall is actually benefiting in some ways because of exactly your point, Janice, that it is mostly a networking relationships industry. And virtually it has opened up. Like, there are a number of conferences that have happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks alone, where some of them have been free, some of them, have a very nominal fee, and the entire space industry is there participating, talking about different issues that are on their minds, and you can be a part of that from the comfort of your own home without having to pay for a plane ticket right now. So I would say really make sure that you know about, where all of these organizations are talking, where, there's thought leadership happening, and keep expanding your network that way. You don't have to go through an accelerator to meet new people. Just start with the benefit of having these virtual events happening now.
That's a great point, Bonnie, and actually to put a plug in for SpaceCon that's going on next week as well. I'm running the Entrepreneurial Summit, and that's all going to take place in November. So yeah, please reach out and I'll make sure you guys have my contact information. But yeah, the advantages, unfortunately, due to the virtual nature, has actually led to an increase in attendance, and I think more open discussions, conversations, more meaningful thoughts expressed. Anyone else want to address that question before I ask for closing comments from the panel? Great. We have a couple of minutes left, and I apologize for not getting to all the questions here. There's a couple of questions in the queue, but I just want to give the panel about a minute or so each to just maybe again, we've talked a lot about wisdom. We've shared a lot of wisdom about entrepreneurship and what's worked, what hasn't worked, and things to look for. But just if you can all take a minute each and really talk about entrepreneurship in space and what is the most key insight that you can share. Why don't I go kind of in the order? Vanessa, why don't you go first, please?
Oh gosh, I was hoping you wouldn't do that.
Well, does anyone else want to go first?
I can ad-lib it. Let's see.
Okay, great.
All right. So, oh gosh, entrepreneurship in space has obviously changed a lot since Planet was formed. There's now governments who are willing to support our commercial enterprises. I think the thing that I want to talk about that contributed to our success has really been being humble and taking advice. So it's particularly as a female founder, I don't know if Bonnie or Dennis wants to talk to this as well, but it's a really difficult balance to sound confident and to present your ideas with certainty as a woman, because we're trained not to, and not come across as cocky and be able to fundraise. But on the other hand, while you're presenting this very confident persona, you need to be able to absorb feedback and filter through it and work out if the advice is applicable or not. And if it is applicable, not to take it to heart and to take it as a learning experience. So, 3 years of building this company, we've had a lot of setbacks. We've received a lot of, some slaps in the face. We've received some bad advice, some good advice. But I think the thing that allowed us to continue was being humble, stepping back, thinking, is this appropriate advice? Can we use this to grow? And not being disheartened by advice that maybe uncovered some of our weaknesses. And that is really what I think entrepreneurship is about. Maybe you don't have a clear plan, maybe you make mistakes, maybe you go the complete wrong path in the beginning, but being flexible and humble enough to come back to the right path to success is what I think it's about. And it's also been something that we've enjoyed. It's sometimes a tough pill to swallow, but it is ultimately a way to grow, and it has been a lot of fun.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Vanessa. Anyone else?
I'll jump in. I think, I find the group here pretty inspiring to hear the stories and the challenges that you've gone through. And I think that it's worth noting that while Planet is, has been around for about 10 years, and we are now, we still like to think of ourselves as a startup, but we are certainly further along. There are still ways that we have found to be entrepreneurial within the company as well as without. So I think it's something that you can find if you're looking for it. It's just this is just such an exciting time to be in this industry. And I'm inspired by the group here, by just what we're all working towards and the greater purpose. So yeah, thank you for the invite, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I look forward to hearing how you all do in the future.
I have one thing to add, and somewhat a plug for what I do for a living, but one of the benefits of space in terms of investment is it's shiny and it's cool and it attracts interest from different areas. That's also distracting. So when you look at the proportion of space investment that goes to, say, launch, that's so disproportionately high compared to what the launch revenue is and could be. There's so much room for investing in areas that are needed to make space succeed in a more global sense. And that's where opportunity lies, and where the data can help you in showing this is what the potential is, rather than just these are what my fundamentals are.
Great, thanks.
So I'll just say a few last words as well. First, thanks again for the organizers, and it was really nice to meet the people on this panel who I haven't met before, and also good to chat with some of my good friends who are on this panel. I'll just say, let me talk about the moon, because that's my favorite thing. But what we're doing right now, iSpace is just our job is just to provide a platform, to do the logistics. That's what I tell people who I, meet outside the space industry. I'm just doing logistics, moon to Earth. But what that will provide, not just us, but all the other companies that are doing this, is a whole array of opportunities for new businesses on the lunar surface. Ultimately, I think it's very evident that the human race is going towards space. They're going towards the moon. They're going into outer space, and the moon will be the first location. And if we're going to be successful there, there's a tremendous need for entrepreneurs. And those entrepreneurs can come from science, technology, engineering, math. I will add a new one, A, for arts, because me and Janice are both from arts. I don't know anyone else who's got international relations background, but we meet so many people that are from different backgrounds, and all I would like to just say to them is that there is an opportunity for you. We need your help, so please join us. So thanks again for this opportunity to speak here, guys.
Great.
Yeah, and I know we're over time, but I just want to thank all of you for being everything that you are and doing all of the amazing things that you're doing and making this ecosystem so rich. I just want to echo exactly what Kyle just said. Like, space is open for business. Like, we need more people, and we need people from all walks of life to be joining into the effort to make it as rich of an ecosystem as it truly can be. So I'm very optimistic looking at the way that our consortium partners talk about innovation and the industry overall, and what they're willing to do to make big ideas happen with new up and coming companies is truly inspiring. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. So I hope that you'll join us, and thanks everyone so much for everything that you're doing.
Well, it was an honor to just help moderate this panel and meet you folks that I haven't met before, but it's great. I just want to add, make sure you have fun. I think that comes across. It's a big part of why I'm involved with space, is the fun aspect of it, obviously a business part of it. And as an investor, that's contagious. If you're having fun doing what you're doing and you feel strongly about the fact that you're going to actually make some impact in the world, I doubt you're going to have challenges finding investors, or at least finding the right investors. So I also strongly urge you, now that you've heard her speak and share our perspectives, to reach out to us, whether it's through LinkedIn or through whatever contacts. I'm open for it. I'm going to put in the post here the way to reach me. So thanks again. Thank you all for the time today. And I'm going to pass it back to Ash.
Gosh, that was such an amazing discussion. Thank you very much, everybody. And Stefan, you've got such great experience under your belt, and we're really fortunate to have you today lead this really meaningful discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to all our other panelists, again, lots of experience in diverse areas, and you've been really generous with your time today and advice and insight. So thank you very much. And I know I've been inspired, and I'm very sure you've inspired our attendees today to, go ahead, take your advice and make their own mark in this world going forward. So you've given us a lot to think about and take away. So thank you very much again. And I'd like to hand it back to Kristen if she'd like to add any other extra remarks.
Sure. I just want to thank you all panelists. You were absolutely wonderful and inspiring, and the whole SGS organizing team thanks you. And of course, I want to also thank our delegates that signed on through Zoom and through YouTube. It was great to have you on and asking questions, and we look forward to doing that even more in a couple of weeks. So please reach out to us if you have any questions about the summit at sgsummit@spacegeneration.org, and we will help you out any way we can. So thank you everyone for joining today, and have a great time until we see you again in a couple weeks. Thank you.